Today, Voice of America is broadcasting the fourth and final installment of a broadcast series, Boko Haram, Terror Unmasked, that provides an unprecedented look inside one of the world's deadliest extremist groups. This VOA series draws on 18 hours of raw video recorded by Boko Haram and obtained by VOA. VOA journalists spent months reviewing and translating the videos and traveling to northeast Nigeria to provide additional in-depth reporting. In part 4 of the series, titled Ruin and Recovery, we hear the stories and hope from Nigerians who survived Boko Haram's violent tactics. VOA visited cities once considered off-limits and witnessed how Nigerians are attempting to rebuild. Viewer discretion is advised.
In 7 years of Boko Haram terror, millions of Nigerians suffered bitterly. But since the spring of 2016, a renewed offensive by the Nigerian military recaptured dozens of towns and villages that had been under the group's brutal control. Boko Haram's own cameras documented it. In 18 hours of captured videos obtained exclusively by VOA, they recorded Nigerians being executed in public, beaten, maimed. Who had survived? What were their stories? VOA went to Nigeria in September of 2016. Our goal: to check the government's claims of better security in places shown in the videos and other Boko Haram strongholds. Our first destination, Bama, second largest city in Borno State, where 300,000 lived until Boko Haram took over in 2014. We traveled with a military convoy, 12 trucks with anti-aircraft guns and dozens of troops. Bama was the scene of one of the war's worst atrocities. We found one man who survived. Alhaji Madu lived because he ran. A video of the atrocities at the bridge surfaced online.
Shikenan daya bayan daya wani kuma ya anan a cikin nan in aka sa tukun kuma wani ya rika kamfa guda biyu wannan sai a harba kai sai a jafa shi.
In one afternoon, more than 200 people were killed. Now in Bama, street after street stood empty, buildings torched as Boko Haram fled. The Emir's palace, where the local chief and leaders once met to welcome visitors.
Apart from the mosque, every other thing was gone.
The legacy of destruction is the same in other towns Boko Haram abandoned. Until they can be rebuilt, there's nothing for anyone to come home to. Across the northeast, nearly 2 million people were forced from their homes by Boko Haram. Some now live with friends and family, but many are in camps scattered across the region. In this camp at Bama, 27,000 get by on limited food and water. More stream in daily. This young woman was abducted at age 14 and taken to the Sambisa forest, a rugged Boko Haram sanctuary twice the size of Belgium. She was forced to wed a fighter. Our convoy tried to visit Kumshi, scene of public executions in the Boko Haram videos. Soldiers said no. Though Kumshi was recaptured, the road was too dangerous. We diverted to Damasak, taken only days earlier. destroyed, abandoned, but for one elderly woman, a lifetime resident who watched Boko Haram drive out her neighbors more than once. Damasak has been empty for more than a year, she said. For her life to return to normal and for Nigeria to recover will take time. There are some signs of hope. The town of Minok has been destroyed and rebuilt 4 times as Boko swept in and out. Local chief Lawan Bukar Chiari said more than 200 villagers died.
A lokacin da 'yan Boko Haram suke kawo mana hare-haren nan, ba mu da securities a nan gari. Aka yi shekara 1, 2, 3 muna nan haka. To duk wayanda suke rayen suka gudu suka bar gari.
Minok is being rebuilt yet again. Thanks to a military post, residents are trickling back.
In suka kamala gyare-gyaren da suke wannan, za a iya abu.
Boko Haram originated in Maiduguri, largest city in the northeast state of Borno. Kashim Shetima is the governor. Since then, he says, much has improved. General Victor Ezugu commands troops in the region. He said better intelligence and airstrikes are targeting Boko Haram camps, but there is more to do.
We've done about 70-75% of the job. They are operating in pits and in little groups.
In December of 2016, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari made a bolder claim. Boko Haram was done for, pushed out of their biggest enclave in the Sambisa. But the war is far from over. Boko Haram suicide bombers attack at will, even in Maiduguri. Thousands of civilians remain captive, among them most of the 276 Chibok schoolgirls kidnapped 2 years ago. Across northeast Nigeria, a humanitarian disaster, inadequate food and water for 5 million. And outside of garrisoned areas, Boko Haram launches regular guerrilla attacks. These local herdsmen had just escaped a Boko Haram ambush. The militants took their wives and children. Boko Haram is hidden, but far from gone.
Well, today, many towns formerly under Boko Haram's control have been liberated by the Nigerian military and neighboring states, providing hope for recovery and reconstruction. With me in the studio is Alberto M. Fernandez, Vice President of the Middle East Media Research Institute. He was the coordinator for strategic counterterrorism communications at the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. from March 2012 to February 2015. Welcome to Africa 54. It's been a long time since we had you here in the studio.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Yes. Now, we've been, all week talking about Boko Haram and their tactics. A question here is, from a counterterrorism perspective, what was missed in the fight against Boko Haram in the very, outset of this group's, emergency that perhaps could have stopped this from growing to the kind of size it has grown?
What happens with groups like Boko Haram, these Salafi jihadist groups, is, of course, they take advantage of a vacuum that exists, a vacuum of poor governance, and poor governance in every sense of the word. We think of poor governance meaning like not good civilian government, but a poor security situation as well creates a vacuum, and they were able to leverage the vacuum that existed not just politically, socially, but also militarily to grow. You have to remember that between 2002 and 2009, when Mohammed Yusuf is killed and they become this terrorist group, they were allowed to flourish. They would even go on television in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria. So there was a space that they were able to maneuver in, both ideologically and then militarily, and gain force.
In order to, of course, defeat this kind of groups, you also have to study how they get their military hardware. I mean, how do they organize military? Where do they get these weapons, these vehicles from, and who delivers them?
Well, the reality in much of Africa is the same reality that you have in the Middle East, which is there are large zones of the region that are awash in weapons. And whether you have arms smugglers or spillover from other conflicts in the region, say Libya or the Sahel, or taking weapons from local forces, it's not that difficult to get weapons.
Yeah. Now, we have, over the years, dealt with groups like Al-Qaeda. Now there's ISIS, there's Al-Shabaab in East Africa and Somalia. What strategies are being employed, and can they be duplicated? How you confront Boko Haram, is it similar to how you deal with Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab?
There is a kind of a general similarity. You could say there's the ideological dimension, and then there's the physical dimension. Mm-hmm. The conflict against Boko Haram is not going to be solved by force alone, but you need force. Mm-hmm. So force is necessary, but not sufficient.
So what else?
The what else is the more nebulous part, mm-hmm. which is governance and ideology. Mm-hmm. Especially Boko Haram, like ISIS, especially, has two elements. It has obviously a Salafi jihadist worldview and has a vision of the world. For Boko Haram, it's of course this imaginary vision of Kanem Bornu at its height and the great glories of that empire, which it uses as a club to beat the Nigerian state, to beat the reality of Nigerian politics and governance and corruption and all of that stuff. So you somehow have to defeat them militarily, crush them militarily, but then you have to have an answer to the siren song, ideological siren song that they have.
And Nigeria keeps saying, we have defeated these ones, they're done for. What is your assessment? In a few seconds.
Well, certainly they've made tremendous progress, and I think that needs to be recognized. After President Buhari took office, there have been really impressive improvements in the battle against Boko Haram. But defeating them on the battlefield is only half the victory.
Yeah, because the threat remains. We really appreciate your insights, Alberto.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Alberto M. Fernandez is Vice President of the Middle East Media Research Institute. Thank you very much.